Aren't they wonderful?
It's Oak Park.
Yeah.
It's quirky. It's a quirky place we live.
Yeah, I remember a few years ago trying to get a plumber in for an issue, and I had to give them the address, and they're going, "No, thank you." Okay.
There's what's that bit from Prairie Home Companion? Or something about all the kids being above average. Oh, I can't remember.
Oh yes, Lake Wobegon, where all the men, all the women are beautiful, the men are good looking, and all the children are above average. Yeah. Something like that.
Something like that.
My dad has made reference to that quite often. So we've got Ted is going to be 30 said minutes. He's going to be late, so I think let's see.
Everybody
except Colleen.
So she's not with us today.
I have not heard from her, so I don't know.
I see Christian. I see Virginia.
Yeah, Ted won't be on until after 7.
Okay.
So we'll give Colleen another minute or two to.
She was at iGov on Saturday, so.
Okay.
I didn't hear anything about.
I was just texting Colleen. I wondered why she hadn't answered me. There's a house on the market on her street.
Oh yeah, are you thinking of moving? Or are you?
We're always thinking. I think in this environment, like, you know, that's like our escapism is like Zillow and realestate.com.
Right. But around here, my best friend who lives in River Forest she's talked to me for like 2 hours today as we were both working, but talked on the phone about different properties in Florida that she could buy. And I was like, she's just dying. She's dying, and she's got 5 more years of kids in school before that. And she's like, but we could get a little place now and start going down more often. And and I'm like, all right. Her husband can work from anywhere in theory, so she's like, I could retire. So.
Speaking of Zillow, did you see the listing that has gone around the internets in the last day or so of the house in Lake Tahoe
with the Barbie dolls? Like not Barbie dolls, but
with mannequins.
Mannequins, yeah. Yeah.
Is it super creepy?
It is super creepy.
Okay, I'll go check it out.
It's like they're all glammed up as if they're attending a hot party, and they're posed all over the house. It's something.
That's super creepy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we will call the meeting to order.
Okay.
We gave her a few minutes. Let's we will move ahead. All right, so calling to order. Will the secretary call the roll, please?
Christian Harris.
Here.
Virginia Bloomshire.
Here.
Marianne Mohenraj.
Here.
We know that Colleen Burns and Ted Foss are absent. I'm sorry, Matt Fruth.
Here.
And Sarah Glavin, also here.
Thank you very much. We will move on to the approval of the minutes from our meeting in January. Are there any comments or questions about the minutes? Okay. Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Marianne. Is there a second?
Second.
I believe that was Virginia.
It was.
If there's no other discussion, hearing none, will the secretary take the roll call vote, please?
Christian Harris.
Yes.
Virginia Bloomshire.
Yes.
Marianne Mohenraj.
Yes.
Matt Fruth.
Yes.
Sarah Glavin, also yes.
Thank you. Okay. Now on to public comments. I do not see any guests, non-library guests. David, I received no communications. Did you receive anything?
I did not receive any.
All right. We'll move on to trustee comments and board calendar.
For trustee comments, I have not quite a comment, but I have a question for David that I got a inquiry from a member of the community asking about the possibility of some hours at Maze sometime soon. And I redirected to David. She had a sort of like a plan and a proposal. And so I just was curious whether she'd gotten in touch with you.
Has not gotten in touch with me yet. No.
Okay.
And some of the members of the leadership team and I were actually talking about that very topic today, thinking about how we might be able to do that sometime soon safely.
Right.
And I think we're going to have a conversation with some of the managers about it as well.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to remember what it was like. She wasn't asking for it to be fully open. It was more something about kind of being able to drop in, and if I can find it, I will send you.
I believe I got the same email.
Did you get the same message? Okay, then
Yeah,
so you guys can follow up if it's helpful.
Great.
Yeah.
No, thank you. Yeah, no. The individual has not gotten in touch with me directly, but I'd be happy to speak with them.
Yep, that's all I had.
A comment I wanted to make. Wanted to share with you all that recently I've been doing some work surrounding reparations in Oak Park, and which has led me to do a lot of research on the history of Oak Park and the history of Black people specifically in Oak Park, which got me thinking recently, what is that history at the library? And so I've recently started doing some digging into what was the library like when it was founded? Who was it founded for? Was it ever segregated? When did it desegregate, et cetera, et cetera? So library staff so far has been very receptive and, pointing me in the direction to some resources. And so I'll begin that research over the next month or so, but just wanted to share that with you all, and also ask if you do know of any resources or do know of anybody who you think might be good to talk to please point them in my direction as well.
Christian, you've already, I don't know whether, I assume you're familiar with the Oak Park Historical Society, yes?
Yes.
Okay. Because they were very helpful to me when I was researching my house, and like specifically like things that I would not have been able to parse in things like the maps. They could like look at a blueprint and tell me things that I would never have been able to figure out on my own. So maybe someone there to consult with. And I just want to note, I haven't had a chance to watch your presentation to the village board from last night yet, but I saw some community discussion of it, and it sounds like it was a really impressive presentation. So I'm looking forward to that.
Great. No, thanks for that piece. I should reach back out to them. I'd reach back out to them over the summer for village work, but it is a good idea to reach back out.
It was things like they showed me like fire department maps of Oak Park, and like, I don't know, from that they were able to tell things like this piece of my house used to be a sleeping porch, and like it would have been unintelligible to me. They just knew how to read them. So
cool. Christian, I don't know if you have not already, former library trustee David Sokol has done research into the history of Oak Park. I don't know if how specific it was to the library, but he would be a resource that would be worth reaching out to.
Okay.
And I wanted to make sure you noticed that Colleen has joined the meeting.
I did.
Thanks, David. Hi, Colleen.
Hey, gang.
I had
apologies for my tardiness.
Not at all. I had one question that came up from a community member as I've been talking to folks in the neighborhood in advance of upcoming elections. There was a question specifically around May's access for kind of business needs in the community, primarily around whether or not we would consider hours for accessing the computers. So if you guys are evaluating kind of a reintroduction to that space, it seemed like for some older community members who may not have as much access for printing communications, the question had to do with like an older family member who was doing a refi and needed access to a printer. And so it just seemed like it, because of walkability, there was some limitation in them feeling comfortable about taking the public bus up to the main branch, et cetera. So I think that may be, an element to consider as we evaluate what hours might be functional as you think of those properties. I just wanted to bring that up.
Great. Thank you for mentioning that.
Sarah, thanks for bringing that up. A couple of people that I've talked to have said something about printing off taxes. I haven't said anything because I pretty much thought that Dole and Mays were still going to be off limits until we had more wider circulation or had reopened the main branch completely. But we might think about some sort of access or some sort of long distance printing situation just so people can get their taxes done timely.
That's exactly where it came up, Virginia. I think they were saying maybe not even access, but just could they send a job,
Right.
to the library and have it be able to be picked up at Mays?
Right now, the only option really in Oak Park is probably one of the UPS stores. They're super expensive. It's not really a great option, especially if you're having to print off, 10, 15, 30 pages, as some people would have to do for their taxes, or make copies, especially if they're used to being able to do it at one of the library branches. So I agree, if we could figure out some way to have things sent and maybe, left with the books to, you can order your books to pick up or order your printing to pick up, if that's something we can do, even just for tax season, I think that would be helpful.
We do right now have that kind of printing service available at the main library. We do not at the two branches yet.
Thanks, David.
Sure.
Any other comments or questions about the calendar?
Okay, don't laugh, Matt, but can you tell me what my last library board meeting is? Is it April? Is it May? When does my term end?
It would end depending on when they certify the election, the votes of the election. If they certify before the May meeting, then we would install the new trustees at the May meeting, and that's usually what has happened because it's at the beginning of the election is at the beginning of April. So April will probably be your last board meeting. Because
that's typically what, right, Matt? That's typically what's happened in the elections that for which I've been here. The outgoing trustees would perform their final actions at the April meeting. Sometimes they would come to the May meeting, and there would be an installation of the new trustees at that meeting. But typically the last official meeting for outgoing trustees is the April meeting.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to check, and I don't know whether I will be elected to school board, and if I am, then I think I probably can't come to the May meeting because I think there'll be a school board meeting that same night. So
yeah, you actually may have to resign if you are elected. I think you may have to resign.
Have to resign early? Oh no. Okay.
Because you cannot serve on both boards.
Right.
If I remember correctly, Matt Barron had to issue a formal resignation from the library board.
So that's part of what I was wondering, like whether March would be my last meeting. So, okay, well, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, no, I think you'll probably make April because they won't be official. The results might not be official, like certified, but by the April meeting.
Okay.
Because they'll take a couple weeks.
Got it.
All right, let's move on. Our staff reports.
The executive director's report, the library strategic plan report, and the core use statistics report are all in your packet. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about any of them.
David, can I ask, I feel like I probably just wasn't paying enough attention and I missed this. You mentioned somewhere these 24-hour digital lockers. Can you just run me through, how does that work now?
Well, right now the lockers that we're using are inside the library. So,
Okay.
they're in, so those are not available
24
24
hour.
hours a day.
Mhm.
But we're just about ready to install the exterior lockers.
Mhm.
They've arrived, and I believe we're getting people out indeed tomorrow, I think, to finish that installation. And then once those are available, then those would be available at any time of the day or night.
And these are for people who they'd put in their book order, staff would fill the locker, and then they could pick up. Okay. I have to say, like, this is I don't know who came up with this idea, but as you know, one of the things I was concerned about when I joined the board was about extending hours and for equity reasons, and this seems like a great step in that, in helping to make access broader.
Right.
So
Yeah. Well said.
so kudos to whichever staff member came up with it.
Thank you. Any other questions about any of the reports?
None from me.
I enjoyed just to, I know you probably tried to cover a lot in a short number of pages. I was just very impressed with the breadth of the work that the anti-racism team is doing.
Oh, yeah.
And I know, Virginia, you're spending a lot of time in that, and like huge hats off to you for that amount of work. Like it just, I continue to be impressed by how that team is coming together and the changes that are coming into effect. I think, at least from my perspective, and not getting to see it firsthand, it's a tremendous amount of work. So
yeah,
thank you to you and the staff for continuing to keep that a front and center priority.
And I do have, I guess, one related thing. There was the material in here about Black History Month. Asian American History Month is coming up in April. One thing I saw in the community kind of was a discussion about Lunar New Year being more prominent in the schools. And so I just wanted to kind of put that on the library's radar as something to think about for next year. I think there's, Valentine's Day kind of like ends up being a huge thing. And there's, but now I'm seeing more about Lunar New Year, even in like Martha Stewart Living right now has stuff on Lunar New Year, which is so it's just becoming more visible in the community, and just in general, there's sort of, and I would reach out to people like Karen Sue, who directs the Asian American Resource and Cultural Center at UIC, would be a terrific resource. There was an Asian American parents group that is less active now than it was in Oak Park, just because it can be a little bit tricky managing the nuances of that, because sort of like the way Chinese do New Year's is a little different from how Sri Lankans would do it, et cetera, so on. And so just kind of, I'd love to see an exhibit on Lunar New Year next year when the time rolls around again. And so just putting it out there. And
Great, thanks.
yeah, and I think there was a sort of way back when, David, I don't know if you remember when I joined the board, there was some discussion about how this parent group had done various activities at the library, and they were great activities, but it wasn't kind of picked up and carried on as a library program, as opposed to something done in partnership with the group of parents, right? And that was one of the things I was hoping to talk to you about, is as we work through the anti-racism journey, and this is, I would say probably not as urgent, but I'd love to see it kind of like on the list somewhere, and I guess especially in terms of in the wake of the pandemic, I think there is some concern about anti-Asian sentiment, anti-Chinese sentiment in particular, the whole conversation around the Wuhan virus. Some of the parents are concerned about what happens when the kids go back into school, and are they going to encounter discrimination along those lines? So that might just be something for library staff to be aware of as a possible issue.
For sure. Thank you. Yes.
David, I know before there was talk of a master calendar of like multicultural holidays. I know blah, 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 COVID. Did that get lost in the COVID-ness, or is that something we're still working on?
You're talking about a community-wide calendar of events like the kind we're talking about?
Right. I think initially we were trying to compile something internally for displays and book choices and social media, but then eventually it would have been either available on the website or available on the website in addition with book options or crafts or whatever whoever was going to do with it. But I know the first step was getting that calendar put together. I just didn't know if that had been.
Well, so right before the pandemic began, when there were still many programs going on around the community, the library, the township, the park district, the school districts, the village, had all begun using an online calendar, an app called Burbio. And there were links in there. I think there probably still are links to that calendar on the library's website. And that was a way that one could go to a single calendar and look and find the events that were happening at all of these community organizations. And I think there were others too, other than the government agencies that were a part of that. I don't have a list of all of them, but that we're still subscribing to that calendar. We're still using that calendar. When I look at it, I still see all kinds of all of our virtual programs are on there, as well as, again, programs and meetings happening at the high school, the school district, the township, the park district. Again, I'm not sure if that's really what you're thinking about or talking about, but there is that community-wide calendar that we're using right now.
No, I was thinking it was more along the lines of what Marianne was talking about, like a holiday calendar. So it would have Eid and Ramadan and the Lunar New Year and Easter and, but it would all be compiled on one calendar.
Okay.
For us to all work from, so that when we're building programs or
got it. Okay.
Or scheduling things.
I got you. Okay. Yeah. No. That I'm not sure that we have that, but I can. I'll bring it up with some of the other members of the leadership team and see where we might be.
Yeah, and it would be. I mean,
something.
Sorry, like just to not duplicate effort, if it can be done with the other taxing bodies, that seems like it would be great, right? And we can avoid, planning Jewish programming on Rosh Hashanah or whatever.
Yeah,
it might be.
it would be. Yeah. It would probably be easy enough to notate those kinds of holidays and events in this calendar, so that when you're looking at it, you come, you say, oh, it's February 23rd. That's a special holiday for a particular nation or religion or whatever.
Yeah. That sounds great. And thanks for bringing that back, Virginia, because I had sort of lost track of the shared calendar thing, and that's super helpful. I'll note that for Juanta Griffin's, I think it's called Only You, not Only You, sorry, I'm blanking on the name of it, the Tea Party thing. Yeah. I saw that discussed a lot in various online community groups. People were really positive about it. Just seemed like it was a terrific event, and it looks like they had to exceed their registration cap because there was so much interest, which is awesome.
Yeah, so. Yeah, uniquely you.
Uniquely you, that's right.
David, can I ask, I know you guys announced in your remarks the placement for, am I going to say, is it Tatiana?
Tatiana's
her new role. I'd love to hear a little more from her. If she'd be open to joining us for an upcoming meeting, just about how she's thinking about programming and the kinds of engagements. There's a group that I'm doing some work with at Casa Central called 2/3 United that is doing a lot of healing work with both the Black and Latinx community across Chicago. And there's some micro grant resources from Healing Illinois that they're leveraging to create community conversations. And I'd love, as you know, as she's thinking about, ways to bring the city together, what some of those conversations might look like, and if there are resources like that maybe we can secure to further her goals around programming.
Sure, I'll ask her. I'm sure she would welcome the opportunity.
I'm sure she probably knows about that initiative already. I think it's gotten a lot of coverage, but I didn't realize how they were doing their grants, and it's pretty sizable. I think their micro grants are like $25,000 to drive conversations on healing.
Awesome.
And David, when Stephen finishes his article for Library Journal, you'll send a copy to us?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Yeah, and if I'm not on the board anymore, can you send a copy to me anyway?
Oh, of course.
Thanks.
That's internal proprietary information, Marianne. We don't share things here.
I don't subscribe to Library Journal, so perhaps I should.
No worries.
I'm sure you have plenty enough to read. Anything else from staff reports, strategic objectives or statistics?
David, can you talk to us a little bit about how the anti-racism talking circles are going now that they're, I guess, a little bit more progressed?
The Black Affinity Group, you mean? Is that what you're referring to?
Sure. Let me just put myself on mute as I continue to talk. Yes, the one that Tatiana is running.
If you're referring to the Black Affinity Group, I'm intentionally not a part of the conversations or any of the outcomes from the conversations, but I do talk to Rashida and to Rob Simmons, who are both participating, and they're talking to me about how robust the conversations are, how much the staff members who participate are appreciating and enjoying those. Rashida's mentioned how she's gradually working with some of the individuals in the group to begin to have them sort of take some kind of ownership or possession of the group and start having it sort of lead itself. That's the information that I have. I could, if you want, I could ask Rob or Rashida to give you a little bit more specific information, but again, I'm kind of intentionally not a part of what's going on there.
No, my question is really like how close are we to getting it to run itself?
Oh, okay.
That's my question, and then the next follow-up question would be, what other affinity groups do we have on deck to get started, and who do we have slated to sort of foster those? This affinity group, I think we were very lucky that we had Rashida and we had staff that was able and comfortable to lead it. But as we expand it, have we pinpointed people? Are we going to be using people from the first affinity group to kind of train the trainers for the next affinity group? Just I want to make sure that we get things stabilized and that it can run itself. And
sure,
I know I'm asking like its infancy, but I want to make sure that it gets off the ground successfully.
Oh, sure. No, thank you. We haven't even really begun to talk about other groups yet. I know that's a part of the plan, a part of the work plan, but we haven't gotten there quite yet. But I could, I definitely could get a little bit more information about where the Black Affinity Group might be in terms of becoming sort of self-sufficient, if that's the right way to describe it.
Okay. Yep. I'd love that, and figuring out how we determine if other affinity groups are needed and how we get those started without a built-in leader for it yet.
Sure. Absolutely. Any other questions?
Hearing none, we'll move on to our disbursements.
I don't have a disbursements question exactly, but I do have a question. Can you, David or Matt, can you remind me where we are on fund balance really I'm more interested just as a goal. I'm trying to get a handle on the fund balance situation at the high school, and it would help to be able to compare those. Are we currently set at like a percentage goal or at a 6 months of running goal? I don't remember the details on that.
According to, I can let Matt answer the question, but I think according to board policy, it's a percentage goal, and it's I think, Matt, what is it, around 48%, right?
Yeah, I thought it was something like 42.
I think
But,
so, because we reduced it,
it was a
right?
range.
Yeah.
We have a range in there. I can't remember the exact numbers either, David, but the low to mid 40s is where I was thinking of.
Okay, I might message one of you just to get the specific.
Jeremy is on the call tonight, and we were actually going to be talking a little bit about the fund balance in a little while.
Okay.
When we talk about our proposal to amend the budget to do a couple of additional capital projects, because typically,
Right.
and in this case, it's the same thing. We typically will spend to pay for those kinds of projects from the fund balance.
Right.
But Jeremy, do you off the top of your head, do you know where we are right now in terms of the fund balance and the percentage of the overall deposits?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, I think we're actually, if it's in the spreadsheet that we're going to be talking about, the target, or where we're at starting at the beginning of 2021, we're actually at 71%. And our target range, Matt is correct, it's 42% is the target.
Right.
But the range, I think, is 38 to 45, somewhere in there.
Okay.
And so one of the things that we've been talking about in the budget is getting that back down within our
Right.
targeted range.
Back to the target range.
Yep.
That's great. You said we're at 72% right now. I understand because of the pandemic. So that's yeah. And then
we also have planned a number of significant
capital projects. Okay, thank you. And I think the D97 I think does it in terms of months, so it's like 6 months of operating expenses. So it's so I was just trying to remember. I thought we did a percentage, so that's helpful. Thanks.
Thank you. So there's the first page of the resolution on disbursements on the screen right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If there's no other questions about the disbursements, is there a motion to approve?
Make the motion.
Christian moves. Is there a second?
I'll
Seconded. Oh, go ahead.
Seconded by Sarah. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we will call the roll, please.
Christian Harris,
Yes.
Virginia. Do you guys mind if I just do first names? Is that okay?
Yes.
Marianne,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Colleen,
Yes.
Sarah. Yes. Is that acceptable? Am I
Yes.
going off? Am I going rogue if I just do first names?
It's fine.
Feels very formal.
Well, I'm sure when we're in person again, we will get formal again. I feel I have to note that I put on a suit jacket for the candidate forum on Saturday, and it was the first time I'd worn one in over a year, and the sleeves were a little tight. So just warning you guys, brace yourselves.
Well, as long as my my work will allow me to wear sweatpants, if I ever return, it's all good.
That's right.
Okay. So our disbursements are approved. We move on to the other financial reports.
You have Jeremy's narrative report here for the end of the first month of the fiscal year, and As you know, Jeremy's on the call if you've got any specific questions about his narrative.
I do not have anything, and I'm not hearing any from anyone else.
I'm sorry, I'm just glancing at this one more time. So when he says that total revenue is slightly lower, local taxes are expected to be, so I guess he says a careful watch for distributions through March will be needed to ensure sufficient funds. So as we go into the capital projects conversation, I guess I'm wondering if there are any early indications about property tax numbers being dramatically lower. I don't know if it's too early to tell that kind of thing. Just, I don't know how close we are to being able to really assess the economic impact of the pandemic in terms of, you know, housing value and et cetera. So maybe it takes a few years for it to all play out too. So.
And I saw someone comment, I haven't verified it myself, that they saw that the lack of penalty on delay on late property tax payments has been extended out sometime. So it may be that they trickle in more over a couple of months than the hard deadline people were. Right.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing I'm wondering about, sort of pandemic accommodations and pandemic consequences. But maybe we just don't know yet, and it's just a matter of being cautious for a little while.
Well, I think it depends on how many people have escrows, and that will just automatically pay out versus our, managing it themselves. Escrows, I'm assuming, will just automatically pay on the system.
Yeah, but things like that, like what about commercial properties? Like if there's a lot of commercial property closures, for example, could that have a dramatic impact on this on that, or not so much?
Honestly, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know either.
I think
if they default, I mean, the property owners still have to pay taxes.
That's right. So even if businesses close, the property owners still are on the hook for it. Okay. Yeah. That's right.
I mean, unless there are, corporation, larger kinds of, I don't know that there's any light manufacturing or anything else in the village generating tax income.
Right.
So I feel like it's relatively stable.
Yeah. I think probably it's not going to be a dramatic factor here. I wonder if other places will see something, but yes, thank you.
And Marianne, it's my understanding though, when buildings are vacant, that there is a lower tax rate that property owners pay.
Yeah, they can apply for a vacancy factor with the assessor and the board of review.
Right.
But that is, a year after the fact, because it'll be on their next year's taxes, not the ones they're paying now.
So knock-on effects. And, I mean, it may be that there is enough federal or other village aid that we can try and stop businesses from closing, but yeah. I don't know. It'll be a couple of years before we really know the impact of the pandemic, I think. Okay.
Okay, I think that covered our financial reports. We'll move on to additionals. iGov.
So both Colleen and I attended the iGov meeting. I forgot to take notes. We reviewed the candidate forum, which I think we felt had gone really well, and they got good feedback from the participants and attendees. So the sense is that it's likely to continue to be repeated in that shape next time around. We also discussed the possibility of somewhere around October in the election cycle doing a more general open thing for people who are thinking about running for office. And I think I suggested the League of Women Voters might be a good resource to help with that. And it might be like putting together something that would be a recorded informational Zoom video that anyone could watch, with then a Q&A portion held at some point to help people through the process. So I think that would be great, especially if there is outreach to communities that would not normally have running for office on their radar. So I hope iGov continues with that. There was, I think, also some discussion of doing a little bit more cooperating going forward, but I'm not sure anything got definitively. So, Colleen, do you remember if there was anything defined about that? I think it was more that we were going to pick it up at the next meeting to discuss further.
There was a consensus that there were not enough taxing bodies represented.
Yes, right. So that's yeah, not enough of them attended the iGov meeting. Simone Boutet did arrive, but sort of at the tail end of the meeting, and the village was not represented otherwise. Sorry, did you take notes? I feel like there was like one other thing that we discussed, but I can't remember what it was.
I put it in the chat. Our bill is late.
Oh, like everyone's bill is late for iGov. So, but it was a little unclear because when we pushed on it a little, because I was startled that we might not have paid, and then I think they said like, well, it's possible that it didn't actually get sent. But something, they're going to follow up on it. So just to be aware, the library may be a year in arrears on its iGov bill of $20 or whatever it is. So it's a small amount. I don't remember the specific amount off the top of my head, but our portion is small. I think that's it.
All right, thank you. COG did meet and we discussed kind of I think it was not everybody was present. Am I right in that, David?
Yeah, most of the meeting was spent getting a special report from the village's public health director about the village's plans and protocols for vaccinations.
Yeah. And everyone knows, right, that they're expanding to Thursday. On Thursday, they're expanding Group 1B, right? So to people who have underlying health conditions. So spread the word. You should be able, I think, to register through the village website starting on the 25th.
Thank you for that reminder. Yeah, I think that was it. And there was some other stuff about the school. The schools were presenting some information about their various return plans and ILA legislation and advocacy. No specific legislation has arisen yet, or still in the filing frenzy of legislation. Stuff is still being sorted out, especially with the new speaker. And then for advocacy, we're in the middle of all of the meetups that have been going on. And I think that kind of sums up where we're at there. Friends of the library?
Did not meet this month.
I did make a Facebook group for you guys that it's completely empty right now. I'm just kind of holding
I think
it
I'm
there.
the only member.
Yay, Sarah. So I didn't want to publicize it till I got friends to sign off on it existing. So
Great. Yeah, their next meeting is in March.
Okay. Go on to no unfinished business. We have new business ahead.
Yes, the proposal to amend the budget that I mentioned a few minutes ago regarding a couple of capital projects that Jeremy and I have discussed that we would like to try to accomplish this year. Both that speak, I think, very powerfully to a lot of our priorities regarding environmental stewardship and health and well-being. So you have Jeremy's memo and the spreadsheet he prepared, so I will let him provide a little bit more context and information, and then you can ask whatever questions you might have. So Jeremy, are you there?
I am. Yeah, so, the lighting project, we started that actually last year. We did some lighting upgrades at the main library, in particular the artichoke lights, because of the wattage that those used. We transferred those to LED, and then also the maze branch as well. It's almost completely LED now after a project last year that the board approved. And so this kind of is continuation on from the maze, really working with the same company. They are a vendor that work with ComEd, and that's where we get the ComEd incentive on this. And so they had worked up a proposal last fall, and because of the pandemic and the budget the way it was, I kept putting them off. But then with the 2021 incentives, they followed up with me in reviewing that as a project as a whole, and considering the amount of money that we would get from ComEd for the rebate, the total cost to the library being under $25,000 for this project, and then the additional fund balance that we were left with at the end of fiscal year 2020 because of reduced spending. That's why I really took a hard look at this and talked to David about it and said, yeah, both of these projects, I think there's an opportunity here for us to move forward with some of these projects, even though we've deferred some of the other projects. And I note in here some of the things that we deferred a little less priority, but we can still come out ahead because of the less spending in 2020. So that's where some of the spreadsheet, you get down to the spreadsheet and you can see, and I can walk through that as well. So the lighting upgrade, basically, it would cover about 240 of the light fixtures in the library. And, percentage wise, it's a fair percentage of it. I think it's most of the lighting that's back in the staff areas. And those are the 2x2 fixtures through the hallways and office spaces. And then you can read on some of the electricity savings and comparables that would save the library. We are part of ComEd's agreement with the village, so we don't pay directly for the electricity, but in turn that gets handed down to the residents as well. But this project, you can see here that I think the cost for this total project would be $64,000, and the library would receive $37,000 worth of incentive from ComEd. So our bill would be under $25,000 for that. The rest of these lights, they're all programmable. They just flat out with full power, they're saving 75% of the electricity that's currently being used for the majority of the fluorescents that we have there. Programmable, so we could turn them off at night when they're not in use. If a office space is not being used, the lights will automatically go off after a time. So there's a lot of different things that we can do, save additional energy on top of that.
I mean, it looks like it'll pay for itself in 2 years, given what ComEd is covering, right? So that would kind of seems like a no-brainer. Like
it's kind of, it's kind
Yeah.
of hard to say that it will pay for itself. If we were paying dollar for dollar for
Sure.
the energy, it certainly would.
Right.
Because we're doing it because of the agreement that we have with the village and ComEd.
It's a little more complicated. Got
It's
it.
a little more complicated, but the energy savings are there and
Right.
the incentive is real. So there's benefit to that. And then there's additional savings for the directly savings because of the maintenance, our maintenance crew maintaining the fluorescence and the cost of that. So that's an additional savings that this would extend out. I don't have the date, the years on that these lights are useful for, but I think it's 5 to 10 years on that they should be good. So there's a lot of different savings on that for the cost, I think is pretty reasonable. So it is a good project, I think. The air ionization project, that's something that we began looking at last year because of the timeliness and the way the building was closed. The buildings were closed. When we had staff in there, we moved to using individual room air purifiers with HEPA filters. Now, when we're talking about opening up more widely, talking about different viruses that might be recurring, different things like that, the thought is, how do we protect more of the public and improve the environment within the main library itself? This is a system that we took a look at last fall. Again, kind of deferred it because of the budgeting process and some of the other deferred projects. They came back to us this year, and with everything else looking at reopening up, I thought it'd be worth looking at. They were able to maintain it under $25,000 again. They made some adjustments last fall and kept it under 25 for us. But that's why I thought, looking at this system, that I would bring it to the board for a review as well. This system is pretty impressive technology. It fits within the full HVAC system of the library. Ionizes the air particles, and it destroys molds, viruses, deactivates the viruses, right? And then it does some other things as far as cleaning the air. So what it does is it ionizes the air, so small, fine, really small particulates will be glommed on to larger particles. So viruses like the coronavirus is very small. Actually, I think it's like 0.1 microns or something like that. And a typical mask will filter out 0.3 microns. So just the virus itself could get through the mask. So what this does is it charges these particles, and so where they attract and get connected to each other, and thereby get into a bigger particle. Because of the size of the particle as that connects, it can also be moved by the air, and that will be drawn through the HVAC system and captured through our filters. This system actually makes regular surgical mask 48% more effective because of the size of the particles that it creates through that system. So there's a lot of different benefits to that. The virus, of course, is a big one, but air cleaning in general, it will make it clean. Mold, it destroys the mold. It's really interesting technology, and it's a system that for under $25,000 to be able to do this throughout the library, I thought was a pretty persuasive system to look at.
So I have to say, Jeremy, I'm delighted about this. I think it seems like a very reasonable cost for what they're going to be able to do. I feel like I've been very suspicious of this ionized thing as like, that can't be something real, right? That this is something that they, talk about to sell stuff that doesn't actually work to, gullible consumers. But it looks like you've looked at the research and it actually is effective from what you're saying here. And I don't even think that I had any particularly good reason for not trusting in it. I think it's just so much advertising of ionizing fans and whatever else that that I was dubious about. But
I have the same skepticism with it.
Yeah.
And looking at some of the companies and some of the other placements that it's been in, hospitals,
Right.
Those are the big ones.
Yeah.
You know, I think a lot of the other, you know, airports and
Mhm.
Google and all of that, they can talk about it and they can spend the money on it. I think the real test would be in hospitals and how that works.
Right.
Some of the in the webinar they show on some of the radiators in the HVAC system, the black mold that's covering the radiator. By
Mhm.
putting this system in place, it actually kills that mold. And then it was just washed away from the condensation without any kind of effort at all. So there's some interesting things. What we would do though, if the board approves this move, we would, for I think it's about $500 at the max, we could get a particulate meter and we would actually test different areas in the library before installation.
Hmm.
After we install it, we would test again to see how effective the system is. And so we would be following up to see exactly what that is. This system is actually extremely low maintenance. I think well over 10-year lifespan on these components as far as what they say. And it's just basically a damp rag to clean the system every year. It's very quick and easy, just wipe it off. So there were a lot of really positive things about that. And I can share,
Yep.
they have the small 3-minute video. There's a full webinar there, but there's also a small 3-minute video that I can share too if you'd like.
And have we gotten estimates on installing similar things at Maze and Dole?
Oh, we have not.
Is okay. So
Yep.
it seems like it would be worth, I don't know. It seems like it would be worth having that conversation about getting estimates as we're starting to think about reopening them.
Yeah, it would, the same system, I think, you know, because we're focused on the main and really
Right.
making sure that it's safe and as clean as can be. That was the main focus.
Sure.
But we could certainly, you know, and that may be something after we test
Right.
and we see how effective it is. We could test the particles in the air at Maze and Dole and see how they are as well.
Right.
If they're comparable, and then see how effective this system is at actually making a difference. So that may be something we can look at later.
I have to say, I mean, I spent a lot of time last March banging my head against scientific reports, trying to figure out what kind of homemade masks I could make that would approach N95 efficiency. And the answer was I could not approach N95 efficiency, but you know, I could get moderately far with things like using silk and cotton and double layers and filters and so on. So, but like you have to go to kind of great lengths with masking in order to get very small gains in mask efficiency. So I'm pretty impressed that this ionized process is creating, it looks like close to a 50% increase for N95s and almost 200% increase for surgical masks. A lot of people are still just wearing surgical masks or single layer cloth masks. So it seems like this actually would do a lot towards improving public health. So anyway, I just wanted to.
And just another layer, right? So
Yeah.
we have the air purifiers in the room where staff are working in shared
Right.
spaces. We have the masking, the sanitization, all that kind of thing. And so I think this is just the next step, the next layer that we could implement. And there are other benefits too. I mean, I think it has impacts Legionella. So there's a lot of things that this does beyond coronavirus. And that's where I think the real value is long-term.
I wanted to pick up just quickly on about Maze and Dole. I was actually, I think, well, Dole, I was curious because I know we don't own Dole. So what would that even situation be working with the park district? And if we wanted to split something with them, what that would kind of be like from your view? And then, yeah, I was wondering if we should probably just go ahead and get a quote from Maze anyway. This might be just something good to say we did before we opened up the branches, you know, almost regardless of how effective it is. Just from even an optics standpoint. So
yeah, well, and I think we should definitely publicize that we're doing this. So it will reassure people as well, right, who are concerned about going into the library again. So it will help if they know this is happening.
The other part of this certainly is the budget. These items were not budgeted for at the end of fiscal year 2020. So that's where the following page is with a spreadsheet that kind of shows the breakdown of where we're at. David, you can move to the next slide there, David, page. Yeah, this here, you'll see along the top, the budget board approved. To the left of the gray bar there is basically the approved budget that we had going forward. There, Marianne, you'll see the 71% that we have at the beginning of this year, projected 60% and 42% hitting the target in 2023. So the only real changes through these budgets if the board approves this amendment, you'll see down in capital expenditures, 511,000 was approved for 2021, and this would bring that up to 561,000 if we did this amendment. Now the calculations down towards the bottom, you'll see the summary budget amendment request. $153,002 was what we came out ahead from some key adjustments that I made looking at our unassigned fund balance at the end of the year. That difference was made from less than expected expenditures in primarily materials services, but there were some other projects that were deferred to. So we came out $153,000 better off than we expected. And so you'll see that relayed up into the proposed amended budget on the right side of the gray bar at the top. The $6,955,187 is really kind of where we're at with this amendment. So then subtract the 25,000 for each of these projects, and we will still come out 100,000 ahead of that. So that's really where that, with those projects included and the $100,000 additional fund balance, we would start the fiscal year with $6,955,187. And you'll see how that changes the percentages going forward as well. So with these two projects and the less than expected spending last year, in these projections, we would be looking at 2023 with the target of hitting the 43% target on our unassigned fund balance in the year 2023. And that would give us 3 years to get through the rest of the pandemic, look at what other projects that are critical, high priority, which ones do we want to defer, can we defer, and then look at different funding scenarios too. So that'll get us certainly through this year into next year. If the majority of the tax money comes in, even if it's late, we still have that cushion to carry us over. I think it's 3-4 months beyond what we normally do.
Hi, this is Ted Foss. I apologize. I've had a lot of technical difficulties in getting into the board meeting, but I want to thank Jeremy so much. I was not there for the first hour of the meeting, but I do want to compliment Jeremy that when I was looking at the financials and I was thinking, okay, what's this $81,000 figure? What's this figure? Jeremy, your description, your narrative really, really helped me. Thank you.
Good, I appreciate that.
And did I miss anything?
So I'm assuming the next step is for us to vote on this when people are done with trustee comments, et cetera, and questions. But I have a related issue that I just want to ask about, and maybe this is for the March board meeting. I think I brought up a few years ago this sort of question about our janitorial services and whether they were union, what the pay scale was like there. And I think they're not union and we don't know what the pay scale is. I'm wondering if we can find out. And in part my urgency around this has to do with last August when we had a faculty union meeting with SEIU representatives who told us about two of their janitorial staff at UIC who had died of COVID recently. And, you know, these people are at a lot more risk than most of us due to their, well, for a whole host of reasons. And I would just like to know, you know, who do we use to fulfill all of the, I'm sure, increased cleaning requirements of the pandemic, and how are they paid? So I'm just kind of putting that on the radar.
Yeah, currently the service that we use is Corvus Janitorial. It's a big company. They have, I think they have, you know, ours is through the local Chicago branch. I think it was 2019, we went to RFP for janitorial services for the first time in a long time. And they came in the most reasonable cost.
Right. So
I think,
sorry.
We do require prevailing wage in our agreements like that. And I don't believe they are union.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know how the rest of the board feels about this. Maybe this could be an agenda item for next month's discussion or some, you know, if people are interested. But, you know, I think there is, I don't know, some sort of conversation I think is worth having about, you know, do we, as a board, do we feel like it's important to use union when possible? How do we feel about hiring minority-owned businesses, et cetera? Like, what are our practices and policies around that? And how do they align with our racial and other equity concerns? So.
I know we've talked about it before. I know, as you know, historically, even before the anti-racism work, we kind of talked about how do we think about supplier diversity and what kind of commitments do we want as an organization, you know, to potentially create a policy around, you know, diverse bids, you know, ensuring that we're looking at vendors from, you know, not only looking to secure vendors and, you know, in a singular way, that, you know, that we are leveraging that. But I know there also, and I'm, you know, speaking, since we have a board member who runs a business right now that is a minority-owned business. I mean, I think there's also limitations, and I'd want to defer to others around. Not all minority-owned businesses are certified. Does that matter to us as an organization? You know, that's also a barrier in many cases to organizations getting certification. So I think I want to be very intentional. I think it's important. I'd like to continue having that conversation. It's something I've always been interested in, but I know we've also in the past talked about we don't have a significant number of contracts that give us that opportunity. So where we do, you know, do we want to support that with a little bit more rigor? I would like that. I think I'm more, especially with the equity conversations, more focused on being transparent about that to the community.
Yeah, and I think, you know, obviously Christian has a business that is relevant to this. I think his perspective is useful, and he could then recuse himself from any vote concerns should it come to that down the line. But
oh well, no, well, we're not going to be in the running. We won't be in the running for that contract. But,
right.
No, this is something actually I'd wanted to bring. Well, the specifics around the minority-owned business, Black-owned business piece, something I wanted to bring up in our budget discussions for 2021. But I've been very mindful to try to let the anti-racism journey play out and see kind of what the recommendations they come back with. But at some point, I would love the board to make a commitment, like around a certain percentage of just all library spending goes towards X or go to, you know, whatever was decided. But, you know, a pretty big commitment around that. But definitely, I think we should look into whether people are union. And I think that also extends to just where we spend our money in general. Like if we're buying a huge amount of, you know, shelves, I don't even know, shelves.
No, well, or like printing costs for the FYI, for example, do we use it? I mean, do we do it all in-house, or are there things that we send out that we use Forest Park Printing, which is a union shop, or do we just? I think it's easy to go for, well, these people are the lowest bidder and their product looks reasonable, so that's the fiscally responsible thing to do. But I think sometimes that's not in alignment with our larger mission and values. So,
And with that in mind, I think you just want to be careful of state requirements for bid process and all of that too.
right.
So if it's a strict bid, it is lowest bidder. That's why we did RFP, because it's a service. So there were other criteria that we could look at and weight differently to select different companies. So just happened with Corvus, they had a lot of the things that we were looking for, and were the most cost effective as well. So that's something that we looked at too.
Yeah.
But certainly can continue that
Can you
discussion.
explain that strict bid process? I think you said that it's the lowest no matter what.
Right. So basically, if you're looking at purchasing a component that's kind of a general component, I'm trying to think of a system like a generator. We're going to purchase a generator and install it as a backup to all different locations. The generator, any of these companies can purchase that generator. So basically, it's looking at going to bid, saying, here's what we need. We need this much power for backup generator on this much square footage in these buildings. You put that out to bid, all these companies can bid on it. We're required to take the lowest bid to make sure that we're getting the taxpayers the best price.
So if it is in other words, if it is a purchase regarding anything to do with construction, anything to do with the purchase of equipment, the purchase of furnishings, the purchase of vehicles, anything that basically that is that kind of a physical or capital project, then that requires the kind of competitive bid process that Jeremy's talking about, and he's absolutely right. And as long as the bids that you receive respond positively to everything to every requirement you've put into the bid, as long as they can demonstrate that they are providing everything that you've asked for, then in those cases you are required to go with the lowest responsible bid. But if you're purchasing services, I'll use the example of the services that we have purchased from Rashida Graham, Washington, and RGW. If you're purchasing a service, if you're purchasing a consulting service, you may want to do a request for proposals so that you can make it clear what kind of service you're looking for and what you expect the end product to be, so that you can compare what various service providers would do. You may decide that that's the most responsible way to figure out who can do what you want and with whom you want to work. But in those cases, you are not required to accept the lowest responsible bid. It's only in the kinds of examples that Jeremy was giving you that you are.
And there are a couple different. Yeah, and it's a $25,000 threshold in Illinois.
Right.
So it's for projects that are, yeah, for projects over $25,000, then we would have to go to RFP or bid, different things like that. Architectural services, there's some other ways that you can deal with it if you have an ongoing relationship. For example, a lot of the work that we do is through Bully and Andrews. Well, we've been working with them for years. So then for certain situations, we don't have to go to bid. We can just have them come in and do the work. Architects, designers, same kind of thing. If you have that ongoing relationship, you can keep going forward without the bid process. So there's just as we talk about that and looking at the diversity in the contractors that we deal with, we just need to be aware of the limitations or the restrictions that we have in place that were in place to protect small businesses and make sure that everybody had an equal chance at those bids. So it's sort of a catch-22. Those things were in place to protect small businesses and people of color getting into those contracts, but that also restricts us from just pulling in anybody that we want to.
Yeah. And typically smaller companies will have a harder time driving the cost down. Not always the case. Large companies have a lot of overhead too. But no, it makes sense. My first thought was, oh, well, what if you don't like the proposal? But if it's for an item like that, it's pretty standard and every company's going to do the same work. So understood.
And there's a lot of work, back-end work. We're looking at our security and access security system that was approved for this year. That's a big project. We're working with Bully Andrews as our project manager on that. They're doing a lot of the legwork, the design work for us. But just received last week a sample RFP from one of the camera systems that we're looking at. And we'll go through and pull things out of that we want. And a lot of that can be designed. So you just got to be careful and make sure that we do everything appropriately to make sure we're fair access to anybody who wants to bid on these projects. But we also want to make sure we get what we need for the library and the community.
I'll also note for the record, I didn't realize that we had a relationship with Bully and Andrews, and I don't think it's come up during my tenure on the firm, but I think Bully and Andrews is run by Alan Bully, and his wife Suzette Ross Bully is a friend of mine. Her sister is my best friend, one of my best friends. So there's this sort of like odd sideways relationship that I did not know about. So not that any architectural stuff is going to come up in the next month that I need to recuse myself from, but I'll just mention that I was just startled to realize it. So and I guess I'm mentioning it in part because this is a little bit of an example of, the reason why I know that family is because my parents sent me to prep school, and there are certain circles that you then end up running in, right? And that's how people get shut out of this kind of contract, right? How minority-owned businesses end up not getting these contracts because they couldn't afford to go to Miss Porter's for high school. So not to say that the Bully Andrews firm doesn't do good work. I'm sure they do. So yeah, they were the general contractor for the main library project, which is, it's a gorgeous building. So they did a great job. But I do think it's sort of an interesting note at any rate.
And then just with that in mind too, like when we went to RFP for the our janitorial services, it's a long process and it's a lot of work to get detailed.
Yeah.
We had 7 people involved in the meeting from staff to figure out what we need out of the service. And it was 4 or 5 month process to get it all laid out. Now, once we have those forms down, then it's much easier to do it again. So that's something we look at with cleaning services in a year or 2. How are they doing? Is it time to go to RFP? We can roll out the same kind of form. So it gets faster, but you got to do your homework.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we have the report from Jeremy and the changes as submitted. Is there, unless there's any more questions specific to that, is there a motion to approve the amended document as presented by staff?
So moved.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Is there a second?
Second. Go ahead,
Christian, got you out there. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, will the secretary take the roll, please?
Christian Harris.
Yes.
Virginia. Sorry, I'm going back to first names. Mary Ann.
Yes.
Matt.
Yes.
Colleen.
Yes.
Ted.
Yes.
Sarah is a yes.
Outstanding. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Jeremy. And now on to process for the annual performance evaluation executive director. See our evaluation process there. David has sent his emailed us all that some of that information and sent his self-evaluation to us last week. By the end of this week, I'll send out the link to the our evaluation tool, and with the plan of having our discussion at our March meeting, or at least the beginning of our discussion. Does anyone have any questions about that? All right. In that case, I believe we have covered our agenda, and seeing all business being concluded, we stand adjourned till our next meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Good night, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.